We are sitting across from each other on two chairs as he's watching, and we are attacking one another. And for many sessions, it went on like that, fighting about something I don't even remember about. And he asked us to move from looking at one another and arguing as if there was a third thing in the middle, a coffee table of problems. And he asked us to move our chairs to look at the problem together. And so now we find ourselves, when we realize that we have an issue and a wrestle, a point of contention, that our first step, even though it's uncomfortable, is simply to join our chairs together, to figuratively and maybe even physically move to the love seat.
Do you find yourself wondering if this is all marriage has to offer? Are you so busy and exhausted at the end of the day that your marriage is the last thing you have energy to think about?
If you're wondering if God has more for your marriage, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Living Marriages Podcast. My name is Aaron, pastor and marriage coach.
And I'm April, spiritual director and marriage coach. Join us as we explore simple habits for building intimacy with your spouse while learning what it means to center your marriage on Christ. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Living Marriages Podcast. We are excited today to be interviewing a new friend of ours, Justin Chan. We met him during our training with Power to Change back in September. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff that he shared with us during our training just got us thinking that we needed to have him on the podcast. And so he's here today. And so, Justin, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what God is doing through you these days?
Thank you so much. What a privilege to be here with you, April and Aaron. I think I was listening to a podcast just before this, yours, actually. Okay. And I love the natural dance of conversation as you discern and metabolize your learning with your listeners. And it's because of your clear and kind and careful thoughts as you swing and sway with one another in topics that felt me incredibly engaged. Okay. That I moved with you in your emotions as you spoke, as you shared, as you digested. And I love the way that you drew quotes together and are still doing that today as mentors of marriage, whether that it's talking about the chorus that you hear. And I hadn't heard it before, but when you said it, boy, it's hard to forget. You don't keep the vow keeps you. Oh, and that really pinched me. And so I just appreciate being here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Well, I'll start with this. I made 4 big decisions in my life, and you can ask me anything about these. I married the girl in the 8 a.m. prayer meeting. True story. Okay. We've been about 17 mission trips together since then. Okay. We're holding down by the seashore in Victoria on Vancouver Island. We steward 3 young disciples. Our kids are 13, 12, and 9. Wow. I hold degrees in commerce, psychology, engineering, and intercultural leadership. And humbly, I remain the only Christian in my family of origin. Wow. I came to faith on campus, not because of a sermon, but because someone shouted down a hallway. And that's all it really took to change my life. For 2 decades now, I've been helping people take a first step with Jesus and their next step into flourishing mission. I founded the PRAXIS Missions Trips Experience with the Power to Change student ministry. That's a short-term incubator for spiritual formation and urban engagement. And today I lead the intercultural leadership development for the organization of Power to Change. That's so much about me.
That's beautiful, Justin. And it's in your role with intercultural work you do with Power to Change that we got to know you as you did some of our staff training. And some of the things that you talked about, the Holy Spirit was just speaking so clearly through you and really capturing our attention. And it got us thinking, we have cultures within marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
That may be obvious. April and I are interracial. But it's funny, we've discovered over the years, we're probably more similar in our family of origin, in our upbringing, and many of these things than, say, we know a couple, they both grew up in a hamlet of Alberta, but very different experiences. So there's cultural differences at play there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that they're not aware of. Can you speak into some of what couples might be dancing around that they don't realize is there culturally?
Those were some interesting wrestlings. Julie and I are both biracial couples. Okay. And so we both come from different arenas, the Pan-Asian experience, and we grew up in different countries and fell in love on a mountain while going to college. And so it really rejigged how we assumed what life would be like. And still today, it's been 17 years of marriage, and I still wonder, like, how do we celebrate well Christmas?
Mm-hmm.
What are the traditions that keep us connected to our heritage and our past while forming new ones as landed immigrants,
Right.
as people who are trying to figure out how do you parent children in these ways? And so I think one thing to note is that there's quite a danger when we think that one size fits all in our spiritual routines, in the
Right.
ways that we interact with one another, in the ways that we learn and know and experience God.
Mm.
You know, no snowflake is the same as we think about winter here.
Yeah.
You know, the thousands and millions, billions of snowflakes. And each marriage is like custom designed.
Mm.
I really believe that God has knit something together with each couple.
Mm.
And so we are learning, Julie and I are still learning to be practitioners of love,
Mm.
learning to stay tethered to one another, to not allow ourselves to take tradition and make it a staunch rote experience.
Wow.
And so I think that the real danger is the piety of our old lives. And so some of those can be simple festive things.
Mm-hmm.
Can be we only open one present on Christmas Eve. Or it can be we only eat in my home growing up, we only ate Fijian curry as our festive holiday dinner.
Wow.
And my wife a few years ago asked, "Oh, I'd love to have chow mein. I'd love to have stir fry for dinner." And as we had many guests around, that was her desire to be a part of the table of allowing many others to join and it not to be classified in one specific way. It actually took me many years living in Canada before I realized that, and for some of your listeners, this might be the norm, that turkey was what was served.
Right.
So maybe it sounds controversial, but I find turkey really dry.
Not controversial at all.
And so it is not my preference. So then when we look at those preferences, do we think of them as like we have to do them? And this is what maintains our relationship? Or are they allowed to flow and ebb and change? Can we be agile with the way that we interact with one another in order to serve one another? And so, yes, that Christmas meant laying down what I had hoped to eat in order to serve the whole, in order to serve my wife, in order to serve her family. And I think that's at the heart of what we're hoping for. Is that are we willing to be malleable enough to learn to find a way to feather ourselves together, untethered from tradition, in a way that honors the way that God has made us and shaped us for one another.
Wow.
And I hope it moves us into a place of great delight in one another and delight with God.
And as you're saying that, I'm wondering what the journey has been for you and Julie in terms of figuring out what things to kind of build up and encourage individually and what things to kind of bring together and create something new. Like, has there been a balance in that?
Absolutely.
Has that been a struggle?
Yeah, great question. That's an uncomfortable one, but a good one. Well, I think of a story that kind of comes to mind often. I love my wife. I love her deeply, but she needs more rest than I do.
Okay.
She needs more sleep in the evening. She needs an afternoon nap. And so when it comes to Sunday, when it comes to Sabbath time, when it comes to our vacations, her desire is an untethered, non-alarmed nap. That's hard to do in a home with 3 kids.
Yeah.
It's been hard to do in spaces that we were small. We used to live in an apartment, all 5 of us, especially during those COVID years, was really tough. And so what that meant is I needed to find a way in order to serve her to truly rest in ways that God asks us to rest and invites us and leads us into green pastures and still waters. And so my activity score is on the opposite. If I didn't have to sleep, I don't think I would. But thank goodness. Thank goodness God demands it and my body gives out at some point. And so our scoring for energy levels and the need for rest is different. And so one way that I found to honor my wife in those fashions is not to judge her for it, even though those early years I definitely did. And I wanted her to companion with me and to go on a mountain bike ride or at least to tour the city in some way. And what she really needed was rest. We were both ministering on campus and our days were long and they went into the evenings. And it was a season where we were learning how to find joy in the pull away from the insatiable needs and the desperation to minister alongside and with others. And so that meant when Sunday afternoons came along, it was a choice. It was a choice to make sure that she could have a nap. And that has carried on for years with all of our kids. For me, that means I had spent a long time learning how to hike on my own, picking up carpentry on my own.
Oh, wow.
As a heady person, working with my hands is difficult. And so it was a good challenge to meet there.
Mm.
Now, our regular routine is I take the kids swimming.
Okay.
Yes, that's for survival. We live on an island, so they better know how to swim. And so part of me was moving towards that in my desire to coach them. And so Sunday afternoons often is a untethered nap time where there's no expectation for Julie to wake at a certain time. And it often means long afternoons with myself and the kids together, whether that's at the leisure center, the local pool, or whether that's some games that we play. This is how my kids and I have learned to play pickleball, actually, is in that afternoon time. And I think coming alongside that, because some of your listeners are not just married, they are parents too.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that we see that in our own kids' lives is saying yes to them that gives them delight. And so I did not want to play pickleball. I've been a diehard tennis fan and player for most of my life. I played at a junior level when I was in high school. And here we are, and my son's like, we got to play a pickleball. And I said, that's sacrilege. Like, that is not a real sport. And have learned over time, it's an incredible real sport, and it is a great joy. But the afternoon has been that learning alongside them. So what gives them delight is saying yes to them when they want to play. And it's not a turn away. It's not a giving up of something. It's a choice and a desire, and to become intentional that I say yes to them. So it's both and. It gives my spouse a time to rest and to be softly awoken. And yes, sure, the cologne of chlorine is pretty strong. But the opportunity to coach our kids, to delight with them in the joys that they have, is a memory and a hope that I will keep and I don't ever want to lose. So if that's a beginning to this wondering of how do you fit together?
Yeah.
And yes, those are social cultures. Those are not necessarily our ethnic cultures, but it begins there. Begins with the rhythms of our life. And are they oriented towards each other? And are they oriented towards God?
Right. Wow. So much to take in with that, Justin, and a beautiful learning that I'm experiencing right now. This idea that in honoring our spouse, we have to honor the differences without letting those differences drive us apart. Because
amen.
So often in marriage ministry, we talk about drift and difference as being the two
big time
killers.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you, in leisure, in rhythm, you've found ways of honoring difference while still maintaining unity. Can you talk more? You mentioned earlier something about spiritual practices too, because something we're learning is that we're all different, even in our spirituality, how we experience God, how we feel close to God. We were talking before we recorded. We have relatives who the husband loves theology, loves apologetics.
That's great.
Which is great. And the wife loves prayer and solitude and these beautiful practice too. And we've heard that sometimes it's hard to feel connected.
Yeah.
Because our spiritual rhythms are so differently, and yet it feels like God intends us to find unity in that as well.
All of us wish to be experts. That's like something we were sold early on in life. Can you be an expert, specialize in this, and take these degrees in order to do this, get the certification? And then we realize that we're actually just practitioners. We're all just learners trying to figure out how to love one another best and how to love and honor God in the full way. There's something that you got me triggering and thinking about, and that is, in order to be aware of others, we need to also be self-aware. And so I think of us, Psalm 139, in the sense of like, search my heart, Lord, know my thoughts, and work me through my anxiousness, to paraphrase. But this nearness to God, I think, brings a clarity to hidden motives and fears. And it draws us near to God and his word, and it means being unveiled before him, digging deeper in honesty with ourselves and then with another. I think it carries over in 145. Is like, the Lord is close to all who call on him and all who call on him in truth. And I think that's the desperation of your friends.
Mm.
whether it's to study the commentaries, which I also can find myself absorbed in at times
Mm.
and love it.
Mm.
That's part of the reason what keeps me connected to ministry today. And yet at the same time, Julie has taught me a number of ways where the rested moments of single breath prayers
Mm.
have brought great stillness to my life.
Mm.
As I mentioned before, I like to move quickly, and my life loves to move more slowly. And for many years, and I confess to this, many years I felt like it was an anchor dragged across the ground,
Okay.
and it was incredibly frustrating. And what I learned in that space of coming to like this frustration and these afternoons when the kids didn't want to go swimming,
Mm.
and I found myself seeking the shore. It's a part of my history, my personal history. I grew up in Fiji, where my parents are from. And so very often on my summers were these seas, which are like winters there, but there were times where I was just living off the beach, living off the
Mm.
sea. And the sea, the ocean, became a restorative place. I didn't know this until much later in hindsight to look back and realize, why do I feel so safe by the water?
Mm.
I don't know. And in adulthood, in ministry, we find ourselves living on the island in these last 15 years. And the ocean, the waves, these rhythmic laps on the shore have become these refreshment moments. The deep breathing of the salty air, the gritty sand under my toes. I know that they talk about this, scientists talk about this Leonard effect, these negative ions that are abundant at the beach and at waterfalls.
Mm.
And it's the separation of electric charge that occurs with these water droplets. And it feels as though you're breathing in, well, we actually know that we're breathing in iron-rich air, which is beneficial physically, mentally. It boosts your immune system, carrying oxygen, and it gives you great clarity. And so I peer across the ocean on the horizon, see a distant cruise ship, often it's Victoria, by the way, and the glare of sunlight reflecting off the water. And those moments are grounding. That air is enriched, and I breathe easier. And I become aware not only myself, but my body breathing in the sense that God's refreshment is that rhythmic waves of grace
Mm.
lapping at the shoreline, that God is with me, that Emmanuel is here. And it causes me to think about and wrestle with that I move fast and the Lord moves slow.
Mm.
And that perhaps my wife knew something far more than I did.
Mm.
That yes, our minds can be at play, and I want them to be, and I'm asking them to be. But I also know I need to wait. Because only in the waiting, only in the slow do I recognize that God moves at a different speed than me. It's why we call it Godspeed.
Huh.
She taught me that.
Wow.
Yeah, when you say Godspeed, I think when I hear that, to me, it feels like something that should be quick.
Yeah, of
I don't
course.
know why, but that's just immediately what comes to mind. And so that's very, I mean, you talked about self-awareness, and it sounds like you've gone through a process of becoming more
Yeah.
self-aware in regards to your natural tendencies,
Mhm.
and also then learning from the person that you do life together with about how to slow down.
Yeah.
And I'm curious on the other side of things, are there things that Julie might say that she's learned from you or engaged in that she might not have otherwise?
One of the ways that we experience difference is well, if you're familiar with, I can't remember the author of this book, but Spiritual Pathways, it's an older book.
Okay.
And it talks about these natural propensities that we have to feel as though we're connected to the divine. It's as though as when the atmosphere becomes thin, the heavens become close.
Yeah.
And some of those ways for us overlap.
Mm.
So Julie and I are both learners, and we find ourselves in regular book clubs with each other. This is something that's a great joy. We're both incredible learners, and we've been that way all of our lives. And what's beautiful now is that Julie stretches into arenas that I don't necessarily understand or care about. And same for me in all of my learning and continued learning and further study in missiology and theology and the wrestlings of those impacts. And so we often trade ideas together when we sit down. And so our dates are often very full of, hey, have you thought about this? And what about that? And oh, I would like to employ this. And that's interesting. And we come from it's wonderful to share each other's libraries with one another. But a way that we experience difference is my sense of activism. So not only a physical speed, but an active speed that is invested in changing something that I see at fault. Now, that can become very dangerous if you just want to poke at something.
Right.
But when it's generated with the desire to bring hope and justice, to live out mercy, that's been a stretch for my wife.
Mm.
So often that requires some public witness. Often that requires investing in a way that is in a part of our lives or society or communities that feels a little bit, per se, in quotations, dirty.
Mm.
How do we live amongst those who are at the edges and the fringes of Jesus's life, those that did not want to look? No Christian would want to say, oh, I kind of want to avoid those
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
But to be honest, we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what does it mean to look down the alleyway? What does it mean to face and to gaze at each other's eyes and be in within smelling distance of one another?
Mm.
We
Wow.
know what body odor smells like,
Yeah.
and we also know what love feels like.
Mm.
And many times that means looking at someone and calling them their name for the
Mm.
first time in many years. So that's been a stretch for Julie as we come to love one another. I want to take what she would call some risks in a public declaration in a way that witness is very visible and tangible. It's what drove me actually to create that praxis experience
Okay.
where we are alongside and with people who are often forgotten and left
Mm.
out. Per se, the lepers of the day, the outsiders.
Yeah.
They don't deserve to be outside.
Mm.
They need the closeness and the presence of God, and we can be that vessel, the hands and feet of Jesus. And so that's uncomfortable. And I think
Mhm.
that has stretched Julie, but also opened new doors for her to see a tangible kingdom alive. It's also uncomfortable for our kids.
Yeah.
But when they learn, they realize that the faith that we talk about is a faith that's living, breathing, and active. And
Mhm.
that's really what we want to pass along, a faith that's alive. So that's been a bit of a difference. It's a sidestep from rest, but it's in the active work of engagement.
Yeah.
That is what's been stretching for Julie.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we have to have Julie on with you at some point, so
Yeah.
we'll have you guys back together, which would be wonderful conversation as well. You talked about what a date night might look for you guys, where there's this engagement of
Yeah.
learning and exchange of ideas
Mhm.
and information. It's to be a fly on the wall during one of your conversations would be fun.
As long as you love sushi,
Yeah, oh yeah,
Oh, yes.
we're there.
Please.
I'm all over that sushi.
that's good.
Um,
Then we can double date. Let's double
Okay,
date.
perfect,
Excellent.
perfect. Talked a little bit off air too about a marital practice which includes praying together. What does that
Hmm.
look like for you and Julie?
Yeah, that's a great thought. That's something that we wrestle with. As Christians, I think we get a lot of ideals.
Mm.
And some of those ideals, and God bless them. God bless them. And I wish I was them for people who are regularly kneeling at the bed. And yes, I've read those books, walked through those conferences, sat through those marriage engagements, and said, if you want a long-term marriage, then you need to kneel together. Absolutely. There's a part of Julie and I's lives, and I think actually my guess is it's the majority, that we see the minority and we actually don't meet that ideal and that standard, and then we just shirk away.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
We move away because we don't know how to build a systematic rhythm of kneeling at the bed together. I wish we all, and I wish I'd started that earlier, and boy, do I wish I would practice that now. However, one of the ways I think Julie and I experience great closeness is when we experience difficulty, when tragedy comes our way, when things feel unresolved and unsolvable, we find ourselves sometimes annoyingly holding hands and praying,
Oh.
sometimes in ways that we don't fit together, but
Mm.
know that what we desire is closeness with the Creator. One of our, at the time, he was a counselor and a therapist helping us through, a weak moment of marriage. And he gave this imagery of we are sitting across from each other on two chairs as he's watching, and we are attacking one another.
Mm.
And for many sessions, it went on like that, fighting about something I don't even remember about. And he asked us to move from looking at one another and arguing as if there was a third thing in the middle, a coffee table of problems.
Mm.
And he asked us to move our chairs to look at the problem together.
Together, yeah.
And so now we find ourselves, when we realize that we have an issue and a wrestle, a point of contention, that our first step, even though it's uncomfortable, is simply to join our chairs together, to
Mm.
figuratively and maybe even physically move to the love seat. And then pray with one another. Perhaps it's kneeling, perhaps it's not. And to ask the Lord to work in ways that we can barely or not even imagine.
Wow.
I think if that becomes the only thing that we remember about prayer and the activity of our prayer life, even though Julie and I are both great at praying in different spaces, it's a bit
Yes.
harder in marriage. Somehow you lose grip.
Yeah. Yeah.
You as people who pray amongst others, as a person who gets asked to pray in large settings,
Yeah.
and yet at the home, it's the simplest places where it becomes a trip up.
Yeah.
And so if we can move to the love seat, if we can pray with one another with hearts open and hands open and a grip with what God would do in and through that moment, boy, every time we have done that, He has met us. Every time we have done that, the collaboration with the Spirit has brought a sense of synergy, a sense of clarity. And even if it is to move us to a place of like, please forgive me, or move us to a place of release or a place of affirmation with one another, then that's fantastic. So when the dishwasher breaks, when your friend is in a car accident, when your kid chooses the foolish path, dare we say, do we take bended knee? Do we practice and remind each other that God sees us and knows our struggles and meets us at the points of our great desperation? His desire is to bring reconciliation and renewal. So it's a choice. I wish it was systematic, but now it takes the points of tension that draw us together. And I'm so glad for that. As a part of this 2025, I'm going to be looking over my journal, and I keep a bullet journal as a part of my nightly exam. And one of those little squares that I color in is, did we pray together this week?
Oh, wow.
And so I wanted to measure over across the year how often we chose to do that, even though that's not our natural rhythm. So I haven't yet tallied. I'm kind of curious and yet nervous to check that tally as I look across the months in that journal.
Wow. One last thought here, and I feel like we could have 5 more conversations in this one episode, but I want to give one last thought because I know for a lot of our listeners who might be hearing this, there's beauty and power in that illustration of coming from opposing chairs to the love seat. But for some people, that might even feel a step too far.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you have any counsel, wisdom, advice, even just from your own experience. One thing I've been inspired by listening to you is we run into these points of resistance or contention in my own thing, where it would be easy to say these differences are going to drive us apart.
Yeah.
I'm going to be bitter about my spouse's practice or rhythm or speed of life or whatever. And what I keep hearing from you is that's when it's time to get curious. That's when it's time to wonder.
Well worded, Jared.
What would be some encouragement, Justin, that you could give our listeners at that point, how to engage in wonder rather than separation?
I hope this story touches on that, but I couldn't leave you today without telling you the story. I hope this connects to this.
Okay.
I actually see that it does, but so follow with me.
Okay.
A couple of handfuls of years ago, depression came knocking at our door. As it entered our home, it stole my wife and held her captive. It's as if this third entity stepped into our relationship. Ugh. It became frustrated, very angry. Actually, I felt quite betrayed. Daily nighttime and daytime sleeping patterns were all askew. And often I would find in the mid-afternoon that the bedroom door was closed, and I could either hear whispers or snoring. My wife hates that when I say snoring. I felt tied up and locked out of the most intimate space of our marriage. I desperately wanted to connect and wanted to tackle depression that was raging. And those months were long and those years became effortful. I finally remember seeking help from a mentor who suggested this. If you can't be present with her, be present for her. If you can't be present with her, be present for her. Perhaps that's the moral you take away in that question you ask, Aaron. So the next daylight whimper of a nap, I sat at the locked door, at the front of the locked door, to pray, to intercede, to say yes. I lamented because we couldn't connect, and that depression felt like a thief. And yet at times I prayed with hope and believed that for my spouse, that things could change, that healing was a process, and that one day all things would be finally renewed, where no tears and no death would be. So sitting at that bedroom door present for her meant praying with belief. And I discovered that it wasn't just the blessings of my favorite human that I was missing. The sitting actually taught me a posture before God. It turned my resentment into revelation, my hopelessness into humility, and my longing for interaction into a God-shaped affection. So in that sitting posture at the closed door became my Psalm 23, my still waters, my green pastures, where God renewed my perspective and tuned my heart to his. He knows that my wife is in pain, and he loves her more than I could. And he was teaching me how again to love her, that I could be present for her in her inability to be present with me or with God. Now we know that God never leaves us, but you get the drift. The presence of God intercedes for the hopeless because Jesus has overcome the world. So we take heart and we find a way to move closer. So perhaps it's not from two chairs opposite to the love seat. Maybe that's too big of a jump. But perhaps could you be willing at least to be present for?
That's beautiful. Justin, I'm wondering, as a closing benediction, would you be willing to pray for our listeners and for us?
Absolutely.
That would be wonderful.
That would be a great joy. Yahweh, you are right here in our closeness of breath, breathing into our lives. Spirit, you are guiding us at the speed of your schedule, at the choice of your will. Father, we confess that we struggle and are still learning to love one another well. Teach us again how to love like you, with great compassion, with great care, with great stewardship, with great wisdom. Father, we pray for husbands and wives now as they look to you in their present day struggle. Would you remind them of your closeness, your breath? Maybe it's by the sea, or maybe it's at a leisure pool, that they would recognize and know that you have never left them. You cannot forsake them, that you're with them. So breathe through us in our inability to be present with one another. Would you make us capable to love? Amen.
Thank you for the privilege of journeying with you today as we seek God's best for our marriages.
Before you go, if you've been blessed, challenged, or inspired by what you've heard today, please bless us by hitting the follow button, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and sharing this podcast with family and friends.
You can also support this nonprofit podcast by making a charitable donation at our website, livingmarriages.com.
Until next time, praying the life, intimacy, and connection of God's love over you and your marriage.